Welcome, listeners, but take heed. We will say whatever we need
to share our knowledge, thoughts, and joy, and even things that do annoy.
Before we begin, please be aware, we have a tendency to swear.
You have been warned, make no mistake, so join us now.
We're for Fawkes' sake.
Welcome to For Fawkes' Sake, a Harry Potter book movie compare and contrast podcast. I'm Carly, and the board game loving Gryffindor to my right is Ellen.
That's me. We both love board games, though.
It is true.
Your voice sounds pretty.
I'm just living my best life. It's fine.
Is it allergies or sick?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's been one thing after another in both of our households lately.
It's been rough.
Here's hoping things can get back on track soon. Not just with this podcast, but with life.
Indeed.
While we're waiting for that to happen, let's just fly on into the Phoenix flashback. Last week, we covered the second half of Chapter 13, The Secret Riddle, and the corresponding film scenes that lack the majority of the details. We visit a young Tom Riddle in a Muggle orphanage. There's no trace of the gaunts in his face, so Merope got her dying wish. Yay! Youngledore has a conversation with Tommy about the different things he can do. Hint, it's magic. After a lengthy conversation, Youngledore is convinced Tom will come to the school. Unless you're watching the movie, in which case we miss out on every major key detail and Youngledore seems to leave more perplexed than ever.
During episode 219, Lemon Water, our Potter Pondering was, when do you think the trace starts? As soon as you've been accepted to Hogwarts or after you start attending?
Hi, this is Jessica calling in my Potter Pondering about when the trace starts. And honestly, I think the trace starts either at birth or first use of magic. Wouldn't that be how they know when a magical child is born to a Muggle family? If the trace didn't start until after their first year of school, then how would they know who the Muggleborns are? Obviously, kids like Ron and Harry were born to magical parents, so they've got that specific registry or Ministry of Magic birth certificate or whatever, but I think they're still tracing magic kids long before they first attend the school. Like, hypothetically, imagine little 4-year-old Hermione performing magic for the first time. It would be in a Muggle-populated area, so there would be like an investigation of sorts as to the cause of the magic, and obviously they discover there's a Muggle born. Which also brings up the curiosity of, do they ever contact the child and their family, like before they receive the letter and the little visit from like the school official? Say the child's like extra powerful or whatever and it's becoming suspicious. It's just, I think I'm way overthinking this, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to say. This one really got me thinking, especially how it works with getting the trace removed. But I mean, that's a whole other discussion. Long story short, I think the trace is probably different for Muggleborns compared to Magicborns, just based on how they're raised and where they live. Like, maybe a Magicborn doesn't technically get traced until after their first year of school because they have their magic parents to teach them and keep them in line. But for Muggleborns, they're traced earlier to 1, find them in the first place, and 2, make sure nothing goes wrong.
Hey guys, it's Jackson here with my Potter Pondering. I think the trace starts when a wizard's born, actually, because, you know, they're accepted, they get their name down at Hogwarts when they're born in that book, so I think that's part of the trace. So, yeah. Or if it happens later, I think it's when you start Hogwarts, when you first get a wand, you know, something like that.
Hi, this is Kendra calling in my Potter Pondering. Whether I think the trace starts when they get the invite or when they attend Hogwarts. And I really think it wouldn't start at the invite because, or the whatever, letter acceptance, because there's no, like, information about not using magic at that time. Like, I feel like you get that when you go home or, you know, like, I don't know, you get that somewhere when you're actually attending. So it seems weird that they would put the trace on before they've even started teaching you. So I agree with you guys that it was probably once they actually start attending that the trace was put on. I would love to know how the trace gets put on, though. Like, do they walk in the front doors and it just, like, I don't know, sparkles on them. No, I don't know. It's very interesting, this whole trace thing. She's left a lot up to our imagination. All right, bye.
Thank you so much for your responses.
Our trivia question last week was, what book gives directions on the correct way to juice a Snargaluff pod?
According to Flesh-Eating Trees of the World, you must puncture it.
Congratulations goes to Callisto Whitewolf.
Yay!
This is her 4th week in a row. Well, bi-weekly in a row, but it is 4 wins in a row. And this is really quite a good streak. It's getting up there. Will Jessica let her hold on to it?
No.
Will someone else try to sweep in and ramp up the competition?
You never know. For now, let's fly into the first half of Chapter 14, Felix Felicis and the corresponding film scenes.
Chapter 14, Felix Felicis, Part 1. Harry has herbology the following morning. He can't tell Ron and Hermione about his lesson with Dumbledore during breakfast for fear of being overheard, but fills them in as they walk through the weird mist to the greenhouses. Ron finds the idea of the boy-you-know-who to be scary, but doesn't understand why Dumbledore is showing Harry all of it. Harry says he doesn't know, but that Dumbledore says it will help him survive. Hermione thinks it is fascinating and says it makes sense to know as much about Voldemort as possible to find out his weaknesses. Harry changes the subject to ask about Slughorn's party, and Hermione says it was actually quite fun, even though he drones on about his famous ex-pupils and fawns over McLaggen. But they had nice food and got to meet Gwenog Jones. Ron is shocked and asks if she means the Gwenog Jones, captain of the Holyhead Harpies. Hermione confirms this and starts to call her full of herself, but they are cut off when Professor Sprout tells them to stop chatting since they're falling behind getting pods from the Snargaluff stump, and Neville already has his first one. Ron insists they are starting now, but quietly tells Harry he should have used Muffliato, prompting Hermione to insist they shouldn't before saying they better get going. The three take deep breaths and go for their gnarled stump, which springs to life. Long prickly vines fly out from the top and whip at them, one of which tangles itself in Hermione's hair. Ron beats it back with a pair of pruning shears, and Harry traps a couple more and ties them together. Hermione then bravely plunges her arm into the hole at the middle of the branches, and it closes around her elbow. Harry and Ron pull at the opening, and Hermione manages to free her arm, clutching one of the pods, just like Neville's. Ron declares he won't be having any of these in his garden when he has his own place, and Hermione asks for a bowl. As Harry passes her one, Professor Sprout tells them not to be squeamish and to squeeze them out, as they're best when they're fresh. Hermione then continues their previous conversation as if no time had passed, letting both boys know that Slughorn is having a Christmas party and actually asked her to check Harry's free evenings so he can't wriggle out of going. Harry groans, and Ron, while attempting to squash the pod, stands and angrily asks if it's another party just for Slughorn's favorites. Hermione confirms that it is just for the Slug Club, and the pod flies out of Ron's hands, bounces off the greenhouse glass, and knocks off Professor Sprout's hat. Harry goes to retrieve it, and when he gets back, Ron and Hermione are arguing over the club's name. Ron tells her she should try to hook up with McLaggen so they can be King and Queen Slug, and Hermione talks over him, turning red and letting him know that they're allowed to bring guests, and she was going to ask him, but won't if he thinks it's so stupid. Ron's voice completely changes as he repeats that she was going to ask him. Hermione confirms this, but adds on a comment about him preferring she hook up with McLaggen. There's a moment of silence before Ron quietly admits that he wouldn't prefer that, and Harry accidentally hits the bowl instead of the pod, shattering it. He hastily repairs it, but the crash seems to have awoken Hermione and Ron. Hermione looks flustered and starts fussing about her copy of Flesh-Eating Trees of the World to find out the correct way to juice Snargaluff pods. Ron, on the other hand, looks sheepish but rather pleased with himself. She asks Harry to hand over the pod, saying the book says they're supposed to puncture them with something sharp. He passes it over, and then both he and Ron put their goggles back on and dive for the stump again. Harry isn't really surprised about Ron and Hermione, but he isn't sure how he feels about it, since he and Cho are now too embarrassed to look at each other. He's worried how their friendship might survive if Ron and Hermione start going out and then split up, or if they don't split up and become like Bill and Fleur. His thoughts are interrupted as Ron gets a second pod from the stump and Hermione manages to burst open the first one, filling the bowl with wriggling pale green tubers. The rest of the lesson passes without any more mention of Slughorn's party, and Harry spends the next few days watching his friends more closely, noting they only seem a bit more polite to one another. He figures he will just have to see what happens under the influence of butterbeer the night of the party, and turns to more pressing worries. Since Katie Bell is still in St. Mungo's, and their match against Slytherin is looming, he has to accept that she won't be back in time to play, and he will need to replace her. He doesn't want to deal with full tryouts again, and decides to ask Dean Thomas to fill in. Dean is very excited, though Seamus Finnegan is not, but Dean had outflown him at the original tryouts. Harry tells Dean to join them at practice at 7 that night, and then has to endure mutterings of how he has now chosen 2 of his classmates for the team. This doesn't really bother him since he's experienced way worse, and knows the whole house will forget their criticism if they win. After seeing Dean fly with the team that evening, he has no reason to regret his choice, and feels like the only real problem is Ron. His lack of confidence leads to him letting in dozens of goals, and he accidentally punches Demelza in the mouth. He apologizes, Ginny calls him a prat, and Harry uses a pisky to stop the bleeding and heal her, also telling Ginny not to call Ron a prat since she's not the captain. She retorts that he seemed too busy to and she thought someone ought to, and Harry has to force himself not to laugh. They continue what is one of the worst practices of the term, but Harry decides not to tell them that so close to the match. Instead, he says he thinks they will flatten Slytherin, and the chasers and beaters leave the changing room looking happy. Ron stays behind and hollowly says he played like a sack of dragon dung. Harry tries to encourage him, telling him he's the best keeper he tried out and only has a problem with his nerves. He keeps up the positive reinforcement the entire way back to the castle, and Ron starts to look a little more cheerful until they run into Dean and Ginny making out. Harry feels like something large and scaly erupts in his stomach, leading to the urge to jinx Dean into jelly. He hears Ron say, "Oi!" and Dean and Ginny break apart, the former giving Harry an embarrassed grin that he does not return. Ginny is frustrated with her brother and tells Dean to go on to the common room without her so she can have a word with him. As soon as he's gone, she glares at Ron and informs him that it is none of his business who she goes out with. Ron argues it is, starting to say that he doesn't want people to say his sister is a... But Ginny cuts him off, drawing her wand and shouting, "A what exactly?" Harry tries to say Ron doesn't mean anything by it, but Ginny insists that he does, just because he's never snogged anyone before and the best kiss he's gotten is from Auntie Muriel. Ron yells back for her to shut her mouth, turning red, but Ginny just yells back that she won't. She's seen him with phlegm, pathetically hoping for a kiss on the cheek, and says that if he went out and did some snogging himself, he wouldn't mind so much that everyone else does it. Ron pulls out his own wand and Harry steps between them. As he tries to get a clear shot at Ginny, Ron yells that she doesn't know what she's talking about just because he doesn't do it in public. Ginny just laughs and asks if he's been kissing Pigwidgeon or has a picture of Auntie Muriel under his pillow. A streak of orange light flies under Harry's arm and misses her by inches. Harry pushes Ron into the wall and tells him not to be stupid as Ginny continues to shout, sounding close to tears, that Harry snogged Cho Chang, Hermione snogged Victor Crumb, and it's only him that acts like it's something disgusting because he has about as much experience as a 12-year-old. She storms away and Harry lets go of Ron. They both stand there breathing heavily until Mrs. Norris shows up. As they hear the sound of Filch shuffling towards them, they hurry away themselves, up the stairs and along the 7th floor corridor. Ron barks at a little girl to get out of the way, and she jumps and drops a bottle of toad spawn. Harry barely hears the glass shattering because he's caught up in his own thoughts about Dean and Ginny kissing. He tries to convince himself that it's because she's Ron's sister, but then pictures himself kissing Ginny instead, until he imagines an angry Ron yelling at him for betraying him. He's wrenched from these thoughts as Ron asks if Hermione did snog Crumb. Harry hesitates because the honest answer is yes, but he doesn't really want to tell his friend that. Ron can tell from the look on Harry's face and darkly gives the password Dillagrout to the fat lady. They climb through the portrait hole and avoid mentioning Ginny or Hermione for the rest of the evening, barely speaking at all and both getting into bed absorbed with their own thoughts. Harry keeps trying to convince himself that his feelings for Ginny are completely platonic, entirely elder brother. He firmly tells himself that she's Ron's sister and is out of bounds, and eventually falls asleep. He wakes up the next morning feeling dazed from a dream where Ron had chased him with a beater's bat, but by midday he prefers that dream Ron to the real one, who's giving Ginny and Dean the cold shoulder and treating a hurt and bewildered Hermione with icy indifference. He's so touchy, Harry spends the majority of the day trying to keep the peace, to no use.
The movie section picks up panning over Harry's glasses sitting on the Marauder's map as Harry falls asleep. Professor Slughorn's voice comes in, asking Cormac if he sees much of his uncle Tiberius these days. The scene then cuts to Slughorn sitting at the table with several students, including Harry, Hermione, and the aforementioned Cormac, who is sitting next to Slughorn, and responds that he is meant to go hunting with him and the Minister of Magic over the holidays. Slughorn asks Cormac to give them both his best, then moves on to ask Belby about his uncle. He explains to the group that Marcus's uncle invented the Wolfsbane potion, and asks Belby if he's working on anything new. Marcus, while enthusiastically eating his ice cream, says that he doesn't know, because he and his dad don't get on. He thinks it's because his dad calls his potions rubbish. Unimpressed, Slughorn asks Hermione what her family does in the Muggle world. She informs him that her parents are dentists, explaining that they tend to people's teeth. After a slight awkward silence, Professor Slughorn calls it fascinating and wonders if it's considered to be a dangerous profession. Hermione responds no, but then tells a story about how her father was bitten once and needed 10 stitches. Professor Slughorn greets her and Hermione whispers to Harry to look at her eyes, saying her and Dean have been fighting again. Ginny approaches the table, apologizing, and as she pulls out her chair, Harry stands, only sitting back down after she does. Slughorn tells her it's no matter, that she is just in time for dessert, if Belby's left her any. As they all continue eating, Hermione looks at Harry, who asks her, "What?" She then says nothing and smiles into her dessert before looking up to see Cormac McLaggen looking at her as he suggestively licks some of his dessert off his finger. The scene cuts to Slughorn standing at the door and saying bye to all the students as they leave. When he closes the door, he realizes that Potter is still there. Slughorn describes it as an intriguing object, saying the sand runs in accordance to the quality of the conversation. In a stimulating conversation, the sand runs slowly. The camera shows the two in the background of the shot, with the hourglass in the forefront as the sand runs quickly. As Slughorn begins to explain what it means for the conversation if the sand does not, Harry cuts him off to joke that he thinks he'll be going then. Slughorn chuckles and tells him nonsense. He has nothing to fear, though some of his classmates are unlikely to make the shelf. Harry asks what he means by shelf, and Slughorn shows him his shelf of pictures, saying that anyone who aspires to be anything hopes to end up there. He comments that Harry already is someone, but Harry just ignores this and instead asks if Voldemort ever made the shelf. Slughorn looks really distressed by this question, and Harry attempts to soften it by confirming that he taught Tom Riddle. Slughorn hedges answering by saying that he had a number of teachers while he was at Hogwarts. Harry asks him what he was like, and when Slughorn hesitates again, Harry asks him to forgive him, saying he killed his parents. Though uncomfortable by the questions, Slughorn does say it's only natural he should want to know, but also tells him that he must disappoint him. The only information he shares is that Tom Riddle was a quiet but brilliant boy committed to becoming a first-rate wizard, not unlike others he had known, including Harry. He insists that if the monster existed, it was buried deep within. The camera focuses on Harry, who doesn't have a response to this claim, then returns to the hourglass as the sand begins to slow down.
So I'll give this movie scene some credit, because it at least corresponds to the book, if not
Where?
actually this section.
Oh. For as far as movie scenes and explanations on nonsense in the Harry Potter world go, this scene's like a 9 out of 10 for explanation.
Yeah.
But for corresponding to the book, it's about 2 out of 10. So,
yeah. I mean, you got that dinner, which basically exists to combine everything together of Slughorn, because we didn't get it on the train in the movie. We didn't know of all of the other ones that Harry has skipped. That didn't happen in the movie. So this is just kind of like all of them combined into one.
it's like all the stuff Hermione's been telling him and Ron about, that she's been experiencing, other than meeting like Gwennock Jones.
Yeah.
But it's like all of those Slug Club meetings that he has missed, but he's there.
Right. So it like kind of works.
It does something.
And it was a good scene.
I thought it was a good scene for explaining the connection that Tom Riddle had to Slughorn, but
And I did like, we'll talk about it as we get through it. But for it being something that happened in the book, as something that officially corresponds with this section, like you said, 2 out of 10.
2 out of 10. Yep.
Because in the book, it starts out with them in herbology class, and this movie didn't give us many classes. Like, that just wasn't a thing.
I feel like the movies after 2 stopped giving us classes.
I was talking about that with Len the other night because we started rewatching the Fantastic Beast movies, and we've gotten through the first 2 so far, and then we got sidetracked by Baby Reindeer, Wackadoo.
Yep. Wackadoo.
But one of the things that we were talking about was that there's just so much casual magic.
Yes, indeed.
And to me, I know a lot of people had issues with the series and it wasn't what they wanted, or they didn't like certain things about it, or inconsistent with the canon that we have so far, blah, 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 blah. That is a completely different podcast. But for me, it felt more like the Harry Potter magical universe than some of the actual Harry Potter movies did.
They did a really good job with consistency in the Fantastic Beasts movies in how things...
Within themselves.
Yeah, and how things were done.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that helped. Like, if Chris Columbus had directed all the movies, that little bit of magic that I love in the first 2 movies, it would have stayed and it would have just grown.
Right.
And
I think when Alfonso Cuarón came in and really
well, he knows how to make magic. He
ramped up the magic, it set the tone for the future ones, but it's like they couldn't quite do it as well.
And that one's literally different vibes than the rest.
Yeah.
And we miss out on classes, like you said.
But yeah,
we
like,
don't
that's
get
one
this
of the
greenhouse.
Best things.
Yeah. They're learning magic. Oh, they're at a school, but they never go to class? Okay.
Yeah. It just streamlines it to the point when you don't get the behind the scenes magic. And I understand that these movies can't be 4 hours long, but I'd watch them if they were.
Why? Gone with the Wind is 4 hours long.
I mean, look at the Lord of the Rings extended editions. It's just,
It's those things.
I want those details. That's what made me love it.
I want to see Professor Sprout get hit in the head with a Snargaluff pod.
Exactly.
I want to see
the Snargaluff pod.
I want to see
I wanna
Ron and
see-
Hermione arguing.
Yeah, and I want to see Hermione stick her hand, because that's what they're doing. They're working with these Snargaluff pods. They're supposed to get the pod out of this shriveled up looking stump that apparently comes alive the moment you touch it.
That's so
and
cool.
starts like whipping at them with its like tentacle like branches. And Hermione literally gets her arm stuck in the middle of it as she's trying to retrieve a pod. And Harry and Ron are trying to pull
it
the
open.
hole open so she can get her arm out.
This sounds very sexual.
Well, I mean, that is not the threesome that I want to be a
No,
part of
I'm
or
good.
watch. But in the instance of magic Harry Potter universe, this would have been a fun scene to see.
I think the best thing about Hogwarts Legacy is they give you those moments. You get to go to class.
Yes.
You get to do the stuff. You get to do the potions. It's fun.
And there's so much character and relationship building in this little scene too,
Mm-hmm.
because Ron and Hermione go from being annoyed at one another and having a little argument to
Being
kind of
embarrassed.
flirting but being a little embarrassed about it.
And then Harry figuring out what's going on because he's stupid.
And you get
it's
to
taking
see
him this long.
Ron show more emotions. 'Cause
Yeah, he's
he gets
like, oh.
annoyed and then kind of jealous, and that's what we see from Ron a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But he like
Then he gets like sad.
kind of confused, and I don't know. It's just
yeah.
funny. So what makes them start arguing is naturally
The Slug Club.
the Slug Club, because unlike in the movie, Harry was not there.
Yeah.
He had a meeting with Dumbledore. So he fills his friends on with what he learned there. And Ron's like, I don't know why he's showing you all this. And Harry's just like, I don't really know either, but he says it'll help me survive. And Hermione's like, duh, of course it makes sense to know all of this. You need to know as much about Voldemort as you can so you know his weaknesses. And that pretty much sums up the trio really well, I think. You got Ron that's just like, duh. Harry's just like, I don't know, Dumbledore says. And Hermione's like, this is why.
Yeah. I think that it's good to show how they interact as a group. Like, the movies always make Ron seem so stupid.
Yeah.
Except in, like, the first one when he's, like, really fucking good at chess. Because it does take brains to be really good at chess. I suck at chess.
I'm terrible at chess. I understand it just fine. I do not have any strategy.
I have no war instincts.
Yeah. Ooh, no.
But Ron is really smart, but he does have this side of him that's just so caveman-like, I guess.
Yeah.
He's like, just runs on instinct. He's like, oh, I'm jealous, I'm angry, I'm stupid in this moment. But it's not all the time, and the movies really make it all the time, and it's irritating.
I read somewhere, somebody was saying that they thought that the movies were then influencing how the author was writing it.
I feel like that too, because he does get dumber.
Yeah. And Hermione became more know-it-all-y, if that's even possible. But Harry changes the subject from talking about his meetings to asking Hermione about Slughorn's party, and I feel like that may have not been the best of choices.
Well, I mean, we have very limited subjects to talk about right now.
I guess.
Dumbledore's lessons or Slughorn's parties or
Let's get
what's
caught up
Ron
on
doing?
the things we aren't doing, right? And Hermione says that it was actually quite fun. She does mention that he talks a lot about his famous ex-pupils and absolutely fawns over McLaggen because he's so well connected. But he serves them really good food, and they got to meet Gwenog Jones, which...
Ron is angry.
Wait, what? The Gwenog Jones? The captain of the Holyhead Harpies?
You mean what your sister's gonna be?
But yeah, Hermione confirms this. Calls her a bit full of herself. She's not impressed by it. Yeah, but she's not impressed by Quidditch things. She's just like, oh yeah, we got to meet her. It was neat. And then Professor Sprout's just like, hello, you need to get your work done. Neville already has his first pod.
So this is also world building material that we miss out on.
Yeah.
Because we don't get that he's good, that Neville is good at herbology, except that he reads a book and gives Harry gillyweed at one point.
Yeah.
We don't get that he gets an outstanding in his OWL for herbology.
We don't. And just to reiterate, I actually don't mind that they made Neville be the one who
I don't
give it
mind
to
either.
him, because he does deserve some
But they
credit.
don't build on that. Like, what was the point of that if you're not even going to let him be the best in their year at herbology? I don't even care what anybody says. He is the best in their year at herbology.
Absolutely.
And he loves it. He loves taking care of plants, which is the fucking cutest thing ever. He's a little plant boy.
It sounds like he did it by himself.
And it does sound like he did it by himself. And they're working with 2 other people.
Right. And they struggle, like we talked about already, how... So they get to work. Ron tells Sprout that they're going to do it now, and then whispers to Harry that he should have used Muffliato, and Hermione's just like, no, you shouldn't have.
As a teacher, no, you shouldn't have.
Right?
Do your work, Ronald.
But we go through the whole thing we already talked about of them wrestling this thing to manage to get out the pod.
That they should have used Muffliato. I feel like that's more Half-Blood Prince building that we miss out on as well.
Yeah, that's not one we learned about in the movie.
No, Hermione uses it when they first go into the woods in Deathly Hallows. You hear her say Muffliato, but then...
We don't know where it came from.
No, when she's using that spell, you're just like, oh, that's just a standard protection spell.
Yeah.
It's not something that he came up with. So that's just more stuff that we miss out on for the, title person in this is the Half-Blood Prince.
Right. It's only the name of the movie and book.
We don't get any information on that. And we actually don't really get to see how angry Hermione is about... I don't think we get, the actual level of uncomfortableness that Hermione is with the Half-Blood Prince.
They lemon water it to us.
They do, very much so. She's like upset about it for like 2 seconds, and then it's like, oh, moving on.
Yeah. So apparently they're supposed to get these pods out and then squeeze them. Professor Sprout specifically tells them not to be squeamish. They're best when they're fresh.
Blech.
And so whatever these, I don't know what these snargaluffs are good for. Probably some kind of potion or something.
Well, when they stab it, doesn't like a bunch of maggots come out or something?
It just describes them as maggot-like.
Maybe it's to feed
Maybe.
birds.
What I love about this is despite all of that chaos of those vine-like tentacles getting caught up in Hermione's hair and Ron having to beat them back with pruning shears and them pulling it open and finally getting the pod, Hermione just immediately goes back to saying, Slughorn's going to be having a Christmas party and he specifically asked me to check your free evenings, Harry, so that you can't wriggle out of this one.
I really think she brought this up in this moment because she's like looking at Ron being like, do you want to go?
I know. I love how she ends up asking him too, because it's a little fight about it.
You.
Yeah, it's a little fight about it. Because Harry's just like, oh God, I'm going to have to go. Even though that is not at all the sentiment that he's been showing in the movie.
No, he's like, let's go.
Oh, absolutely, sir. I'd love to attend. So Ron's trying to squash this pod while they're having this conversation, which is proving very difficult. And his anger
Shoots
about this is
pod.
not helping it much. So he's like squeezing it while he's angrily going, oh, is this just another party for Slughorn's favorites? And Hermione's just like, yeah, it's for the Slug Club, which
I didn't come up with the name.
she should have gone straight into.
Well,
He
allowed to
said
have
we could bring
guests.
someone.
Yeah. She does eventually say that.
Instead, she drops the terrible name of Slug Club, which then becomes an argument about how awful the name is. But Ron ends up squeezing that pod so hard, it flies out of his hand and bounces off the greenhouse glass into Professor Sprout's hat and knocks it off of her head.
That makes me laugh so much.
I really wish we could have
Yeah.
seen something like that. And then Harry's the one who goes to get it. So by the time he gets back, Ron and Hermione are just in full argument, basically over how stupid the Slug Club's name is. And Hermione is just like, I didn't name it.
Yeah.
And then Ron says, you should try hooking up with McLaggen so you can be king and queen slug. And Hermione's just like, well, we are allowed to bring guests, and I was going to ask you, but I won't if you think it's so stupid. And I would have loved to see the immediate change in Ron's face. And I think Rupert Grint would have done amazing at this.
I do too.
That immediate change from like absolute annoyance and jealousy to, wait, what? And we did get that a little bit on his face when she made the comment, what if she looked over here and she saw you snogging me?
Mm-hmm. I think I don't like this moment with Ron because he knows and he still chooses to go and date Lavender.
Yeah, I think we can talk about that more when we get
there.
there. But he wasn't thinking with his head. Well, not that head.
Yeah.
So, but like it says his voice completely changes and he's just like, you were going to ask me?
Yes.
And Hermione is just like, well, yeah, I mean, but obviously if you rather I'd hooked up with McLaggen. And I would have just loved to see that moment where Ron's just like, no, I wouldn't.
They don't really do the bickering Ron and Hermione in the movies at all, except in the third one when they're arguing about Crookshanks having eaten Scabbers.
Yes.
And that's it.
That's it.
But we don't get their whole relationship for 6 years is them bickering at each other.
My favorite part about this, though, is that Harry's just like background character trying to break open this Snargaluff pod.
Yeah.
And instead of hitting the pod, he hits the bowl and just breaks it. And then that shattering sound kind of brings them back to reality. And Hermione's kind of embarrassed and she just starts messing about with her copy of Flesh-Eating Trees of the Worlds so that she can find out the correct way to juice the Snargaluff pod, as it says.
Which was our trivia question.
That it was. Hashtag you.
Hashtag you.
And then you've got Ron, who is looking sheepish, but also pleased with himself because he just got asked out, basically. And then the sheepish is probably because he was acting like an absolute idiot before that point. And I'm sure on some level he knows that, but not enough to not be an absolute idiot again later.
Well,
But Hermione then asks Harry to give her the pod because now she knows they're supposed to puncture it with something sharp first, which I feel like that should have been common
Is
sense.
that on the
but
board?
Probably. While she's puncturing this, Ron and Harry put their goggles back on and go back into trying to get another one. I imagine this is just what they're doing the whole class. Anyway, we make it through the rest of the lesson. Nobody else brings up Slughorn's party. And for the next few days as well, Harry notices that Ron and Hermione are pretty much normal, but more polite to one another than they would normally be.
Well, they hit on their vulnerabilities, so.
Yeah, so now Harry's just like, well, I guess we'll see what happens at Slughorn's party under the influence of butterbeer, because apparently
that has alcohol in it.
Well, I mean, tis strong for a house elf, but... And if
Well,
you're
I feel like
watching
if
the
you drink
movie,
a lot-
apparently it makes Hermione really tipsy too.
Maybe it's the nutmeg.
Who knows? But at this point, he has to focus on his more pressing problems, which would be replacing Katie Bell because she's still in St. Mungo's.
Sport brain.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to deal with full tryouts again.
I get it. Those were bad the first time.
And I don't see why you would really need to. Like,
If you
he's
saw
bound to
enough people,
remember
yeah.
who tried out for a chaser role and
Which obviously
who
he
did
does.
well. Yeah. And he ends up deciding that he's going to ask Dean Thomas to fill in, which he's kind of weary about doing in front of Seamus because Seamus also tried out to be a chaser. And he sure does look pretty upset when he asks Dean. But at the same time, Dean outflew Seamus. Like, that's just kind of what it was.
I love that because it kind of... this is going to get some hits from people, but it shows a little bit of prejudice on Seamus's part because Dean's a Muggle-born. Or he was at least raised in a Muggle household and he outflew him. And Seamus is pissed off about that. I bet there's a little bit like, I'm a full wizard. Why am I not as good as him? Kind of deal.
I don't know if that was necessarily his line of thinking so much as it just
It
wishing he
sucks.
could have been on the
Yeah.
team too, you know?
But it is nice that we made Dean Thomas very good at flying.
Until we started having movies and that just wasn't a thing.
Poor
And
Dean
he got
Thomas.
like one line. That's what Katie always called him, the one-line wonder.
The one-line wonder.
But so Harry has Dean join them at their practice that night at 7. And then, of course, ends up dealing with more Gryffindors just being like, oh, this is his second classmate. Not even just classmate. These are like literally his roommates. 2 of them are now on his team.
I mean,
So they're like accusing him of playing favorites. But like, who else? Like,
they're 6th years, so who is he going to do?
Right.
Like, he ends up asking Cormac eventually when he needs a backup
keeper.
so
But
like he's
not-
a 7th year, so
Yeah.
not a classmate. But it's who flew best.
And if there were others that weren't his classmates, they would be 7th year.
Mm-hmm.
And probably already would be on the team if they were good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then anyone going up until 5th year doesn't necessarily have the clout yet to be on the team.
Yeah.
Is what it is, you know?
Well, the other 2 chasers are not his classmates, right? It's Katie, Jenny, and Demelza. And Jenny and Demelza are not his class. Like,
No.
It's dumb. If people are doing that,
They
I would have just been like, well, you come captain the team if you're so good.
Right. But they get over it because he knows they will. If they end up winning, it'll be fine. But at practice, once he sees Dean interact with the rest of the team, he's just like, nah, this will be fine. His only problem now is Ron, who is just dealing with a lack of confidence issue. It's not like Ron is bad at Quidditch, as we later see.
He is when he's not on form and punches Demelza in the mouth.
I can't believe they
I wish
didn't
this
think
would've
we
been in
needed
there.
to see this. I also love the fact that we get a little bit more
Sassy Jenny.
sassy Ginny, not weird Ginny that the movie gives us, because
I really wish we had gotten to see Bonnie Wright call Rupert a prat.
right, she calls him a prat. And Harry, this is another thing that always cracked me up. Like, Ron does apologize to Demelza for this.
Yeah, he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Ginny calls him a prat. And then Harry heals her bleeding mouth with a pisky.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he will in a later book say he never learned how to heal things.
I always read that as he wasn't very good at it.
I mean, he heals her mouth just fine.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess. And
Why did he
he's
think
talking about it when he stabbed his hand
Yeah.
with the mirror, so he could have fixed that, I guess.
It's
but
dumb. I was just like, he literally does this right here. I'm sure that was
He just
more of
forgot
a
about it because it's a
inconsistency.
trauma.
Something. I don't know. But he also tells Ginny not to call Ron a prat because she's not the captain. And she was like, well,
You're too busy.
you were too busy and it seemed like someone should. And Harry has this moment where he like has to
Chuckles.
stop himself from actually laughing at this and just tells everyone to get back to practice.
Yeah.
Which they do, and is the worst practice that they've pretty much had all term so far. It actually gets worse from here.
Somehow.
But Harry's just like, yeah, it's really close in this match. I'm not going to tell him that.
Good game, guys.
You
Good
guys
game.
did great. We're going to kill him.
Truthfully, good job, Harry.
Yeah.
Because that's how it is with teaching. When you're like close to testing and your kids are like struggling, you just got to be like, good job, dude. Good job. You're doing your best. And that's all you can do.
One of my favorite phrases when kids feel the need to show me every step of their art project. How's this going? How's this going? It is a great start. It's a great start.
It's a great start.
It's a great start, guys. Looking good. Keep it up. So he tells them that they did well. He thinks they'll flatten Slytherin. And at least the Chasers and the Beaters leave the changing rooms looking happy. So their confidence has not taken a hit.
That's nice.
Ron, however, stays behind and just very dejectedly says he played like a sack of dragon dung.
Probably. You punch somebody in the mouth.
I love that Harry's response is to just try and encourage him. Like, no, you're the best keeper I tried out. Your only problem is your nerves. If you can get out of your own head, you are a very good Quidditch player.
That's so hard for him, though, because he's 6 out of 7.
Yeah. And you really would have thought that with Fred and George not being there and after the big win they had the previous year that he'd feel a little bit better about it.
I think since most of the team is new, maybe he just feels unbalanced. Like, at least Fred and George had seen him win and they were very encouraging about it. So, I don't know.
He is very nervous. And eventually, Harry's onslaught of positive reinforcement starts to cheer him up. And then they run into Dean and Ginny, snogging in a deserted corridor. Ah, this moment. This makes me so mad, actually, because we sort of got this moment previously in the movie. And Harry was 100% checked out for it, which we talked about then.
Mm-hmm. He didn't care.
And Ron was honestly more uncomfortable than he was angry.
In the movie, yeah. In the book, he effectively calls his sister a whore.
Right.
And he says everyone's calling her that.
Yeah. Do you think I want people calling my sister a what,
What,
Ron?
Ronald?
A what?
And
Harry's
drives
just
me
like,
nuts.
she didn't mean anything by it. Oh, he meant something by it.
Yeah, he did. He was going to call her a whore. And Ronald Bilious Weasley, that's not cool.
No.
I know
it is
she's your
not.
only sister, but let her be.
Although I will say, Jenny's response to this
Yeah.
was savage.
I mean, true, but also she's, what, 15? 15-year-old girls date. Like, I don't care who you are,
Well-
brother-wise. And I know you usually don't see them, but you're in the same space.
Right. No, I think that she hit it on the nail.
She does, yes.
When she says that it's just because he's never snogged anyone before, that's why he's acting like this, I think that's absolutely accurate. Did she need to add on that the best kiss he's gotten is from Auntie Muriel?
Yes, she did.
Savage. And this leads to Ron yelling at her to shut her mouth. But by this point, they just have this like knockdown, drag out sibling fight where they're just screaming at one another. And she's just like, no, I'm not going to shut my mouth. I've seen you with Flem. You pathetically keep hoping that she's just going to kiss you on the cheek. Maybe if you went out and did some snogging for yourself, you wouldn't mind so much that everybody else is doing it.
It seems a little weird to me that Ron and Harry have made it to their 6th year and barely dated at all. I know I didn't date in high school because everybody sucked. But these are like the people that you're going to be around for your whole life.
I mean, I didn't have my first boyfriend until I was 17.
I mean, my husband is my first boyfriend. So, and I was 18, almost 19. So
My husband is my second boyfriend, but I had several other in between him being my second boyfriend and my now husband.
had some in-betweenies.
There was some in-betweenies.
But it does seem odd to me that they are 16. Ron's almost 17. We never hear Ron thinking anybody's attractive until Lavender.
I'm not even sure he thinks Lavender is attractive so much as he appreciates the attention.
I do appreciate that they kind of cast a girl who looked similar to Emma with the hair, and
I never considered it that way. That is kind of funny.
I think that that's funny, but it is interesting that we don't see that. Because most 16-year-old boys are hornier than a toad.
I mean, he absolutely was all about Fleur in the fourth book.
But she's a Vila. Like, that's what she puts out, too. It's not like he has a crush on anybody at the school besides Hermione. And he didn't even realize that until
Yeah, but sometimes
5.
when you meet the person you're going to be with and you're still really young,
Yeah, I guess.
it doesn't work then.
Also, the Hogwarts students are just all doing it in the bathrooms. So.
The prefect bathroom.
I mean, that's a good place.
But anyway, in his anger, Ron actually pulls out his wand to attack his sister. And Harry just
After calling her a
immediately
whore.
steps between them. And I love the fact that Ron tries to pretend like Ginny just doesn't know what she's talking about just because he doesn't do it in public. And again, Ginny, savage. She laughs at him and says, "Oh, have you been kissing Pigwidgeon? Or do you keep a photo of Auntie Muriel under your pillow?"
It's really gross, Jenny.
Savage. And he literally shoots a curse at her, or some kind of hex or jinx or something. It's just described as an orange light that narrowly misses her.
All right, I'm going to throw this one out there. Is there Wizarding Playboy?
Probably.
How many of these boys have subscriptions to the Wizarding Playboy?
Wonder what they come disguised looking like.
Look, I don't look at Playboys. I don't look at Playgirls as, whatever. You do you. But it'd be really cool to see the pictures move, right? The people in them would be able to it'd be like watching porn.
Yeah.
Instead of just looking at it.
What would they call it? Because it wouldn't be Playboy if it like Play Wizard. It's not
Playwitch.
Playwitch. It's not the Playboy bunny. It's the
Phoenix.
A Playboy niffler.
Get it.
Anywho's
is. I was just thinking about that because there are pinup pictures of different women from the different houses dressed up in a very pinup style, and it's cute, and I love it.
Yeah.
Mostly because the Hufflepuff has a niffler in her dress, and it's cute.
It's totally the Playboy niffler, I'm telling you. But let's actually anywho off of this.
We can anywho off of this. We can.
So Ron tries to jinx his sister. Harry literally pushes him into the wall and tells him not to be stupid. And Ginny, though she is about to start crying now, is still screaming at him that Harry's snogged Cho Chang, Hermione snogged Victor Crumb, and it is only him that acts like it's something disgusting because he has about as much experience as a 12-year-old. Ron needs some ointment.
Burn.
Now, to be fair, he did basically call her a whore.
He deserves every
blaming
moment
her
of that.
for being this upset, and I'm not saying that Ron doesn't get this comeuppance and deserve it. But ouch.
I don't know. I don't have brothers, so if my sibling had called me a whore, I would have been like, okay, bye.
I have a very... It's so funny, because even though I have an older brother, he's 2 years older than me. We never had that dynamic of the older brother that picked on me. If anything, the phrase growing up in my household was "Mom, Ellen's hitting me again." So I'm told. I don't remember that. But my younger brother is 7 years younger than me.
Whew.
And I kind of took on a role of second mom. Like, not that I was parentified, but I was 7 when he was born. By the time he got a little bit older, I was babysitting, and I knew pretty young that I wanted to work with kids. So it was just very natural for me to hang out with him and do things with him. And so we always have had a really good relationship, even now. And yeah, he likes to tease me,
But I don't think he'd ever call you a whore.
Oh, God, he'd never call me. Like, he calls me for relationship advice.
Like, I know that
So-
Ron didn't say it, but we all know that's what he was thinking.
He said it by not saying it.
What does he say to Hermione? That she's some lady of the night or something?
Scarlet woman.
Scarlet woman. And he's like, that's what my mom calls it.
Yeah.
What?
Maybe that's what he was going to say. Maybe
But
he
it's
was
the
going to say,
same
I don't
thing.
want people calling my sister a scarlet woman.
A scarlet woman is Roxanne. It's a prostitute.
Yeah, I know.
So
Oh, I know. Anyway.
it's just,
No, it's totally what he meant.
I hope that he got a little bonk on the head from somebody.
I mean, Harry does shove him into a wall.
And Harry's shorter than him, right?
Yeah.
Because he's
I
supposed
don't
to be
think
tall
by
and lanky.
a ton in the books.
But that's still funny.
But at this point, Ginny drops her mic and just storms away. So Harry lets go of Ron. And they're both just like standing there panting because they
We're
like
physically altercating with each other.
Well, Harry was trying to hold him back.
Yeah.
But, and I'm sure that the anger on Ron's side was adding to that. And then Mrs. Norris shows up. And when Mrs. Norris shows up, you know that Filch is not far behind.
Fuck off.
And sure enough, they hear they call it his shuffling footsteps coming towards them. And they're like, let's get the fuck out of here. And they end up going upstairs and running along the 7th floor corridor.
Were they not supposed to be at a bed right now? Or are they just like, I don't want anything to do with Filch and potentially getting in trouble?
Yeah, I think they just really didn't want to deal with Filch. Obviously, they were loud enough that he was going that way because there was some kind of altercation.
Yeah.
So that just seems like a headache they don't need to deal with. And
That's
because
fair.
it's them,
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be fun. I'm sure that's what it was. But they end up running along the 7th floor corridor. And this is just like mentioned in passing. It doesn't sound like a significant detail, but we will find out later that it actually is. Because Ron yells at this little girl who's standing in the hallway to get out of the way. And she jumps like she's scared and drops a bottle of toad spawn, which breaks.
This is important in the books. In the movie, we get none of this because they're just very straightforward with being like, hey, Draco's fucking around. FYI. I wish they had given us this in the book, though, because it really shows how intelligent Draco is in that he's able to figure out how to have Crab and Goyle around without having Crab and Goyle around. Strategic.
Right.
Strategery.
Harry hears the glass break, but also
But barely.
because at this point, he is so caught up in his own thoughts. Because one of the things that we didn't really get into, we got so caught up on Ron calling his sister a whore, is
very
we didn't
upset.
get into Harry's reaction. I mentioned
His little
that,
monster comes alive.
yeah, in the movie,
sounds
he was
dirty.
so checked out. He didn't even react to this happening, which I think makes it weirder, which we'll talk about next week. We'll bring it up again. But Hermione makes a comment to Harry about how it feels to Harry. And I'm like, they never took the opportunity to really show us when they could have,
But
easily.
I really like that line.
I do like that line. I just don't like that they didn't set it up properly.
I know. Well, we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll
but
talk
I like
about it
that
then.
whole thing. I think it's
Yeah.
sweet.
But yeah, so seeing Ginny and Dean kissing wakes the monster up. And he's pissed. Like, he's imagining tearing Dean limb from limb. And he's trying to tell himself, like, no,
He's
this is
a
just because
brother.
it's Ron's sister. I'm like another brother to her. Like, she's totally like my sister, too. And then he pictures himself kissing Ginny. And that monster within starts purring, as he describes it. And then he imagines Ron yelling at him instead. And it's like, betrayal of trust, supposed to be my friend. And thankfully, he's pulled from these thoughts. Maybe not thankfully, because the thing that pulls him from it is Ron saying, do you think Hermione really snogged Crumb? And I feel like Harry just full on deer in headlights. He's just like,
The answer is yes, but he doesn't want to hurt his feelings.
And he doesn't
Get
have
it.
to say it out loud
I
because
know,
Ron can
I
tell
get
just
it.
by the look on his face.
It does make me sad. Like, Hermione gives Ginny the advice to start dating other people so that she can be more comfortable around Harry. And I think that's advice that maybe her mom gave her about Ron.
Maybe.
And that's why she went out with Victor, because he's older, he's dashing, in the illustrated edition, they make Victor look gross, but the guy that plays him is very attractive in the movies. So I think that
and even more so now. I love there's a meme floating around that just says the actor who played Victor Crumb went from a snack to a whole meal.
True. It's true. But I like that advice that Hermione gives Jenny, because we see Hermione follow that on her own merits with dating Victor, with going on a date with Cormac, with the whole thing. She's like, I don't know that the one with Cormac was necessarily the healthiest method there.
No. But we can talk more about that when we get to that part,
She is only 17.
Yeah.
So sometimes 17-year-olds are stupid.
But like we were saying, Ron knows immediately, just by Harry's face, that Hermione did in fact snog the whole meal that is Victor Crumb.
Maybe she didn't eat the whole meal.
No, he's the whole meal.
I know, but
she snogged him. I didn't say she ate him.
I know. But I was thinking that, innuendo. Innuendo.
But he just gives a password in a very, very dark, dejected sort of way. So I imagine it being something like Delagro.
I can imagine this is like one of 10 million letdowns Ron has had in his life. Being the sixth born, always getting the hand-me-downs, always never getting picked first. He's never the one. And Ronald, I have similar feelings. But he's never the one wanted, or so he feels.
And that's definitely an insecurity of his, because...
And nobody's helping him deal with that.
Fucking plays on that so much.
And nobody helps him deal with it, even when he's dating Hermione or whatever.
It's almost like they should have mental health care in the wizarding world.
Me throws it up. Yes.
I feel like for the rest of the evening, they just basically ignore each other, because...
She's got nice skin.
Ron's over there like, I can't believe Hermione kissed Crumb.
I can't believe you've never thought about this before.
Oh, he didn't want to. Oh. And Harry's over there like, I swear I only have platonic feelings for Ginny. It's just elder brother, that's all that it is. She's Ron's sister, she's out of bounds. And
I like that that's where he falls asleep.
She's Ron's fall asleep there. And I love the fact, too, that where I decided to cut off the chapter was him waking up after having a really bizarre dream where Ron was chasing him with a beater's bat. So, yeah, sure, these are totally just platonic elder brother feelings, Harry, that you have to tell yourself she's out of bounds to date. He's clearly worried how Ron would feel and just trying to suppress that, but it's coming out in his subconscious in dreams. But the funnier thing to me is that by midday, he's just like, oh my god, I would much rather be chased with a bat by Ron than deal with the Ron I am dealing with now.
Grumpy, savage.
Yeah, not only is he ignoring Dean and Ginny, he's doing the same thing to Hermione, who has no idea why. And she's just hurt. She doesn't understand why he's all of a sudden being so icy and indifferent to her.
Just wait, because at the end of this chapter, he's going to be making out with Lavender because he's a trash can.
We'll talk about that quite a lot then.
We will.
And Harry is thrown back into that position of having to try and keep the peace between his two friends, which was exactly what he was worried about the moment that Hermione mentioned taking him to this party. And it just sort of happened a little sooner than he had thought.
We don't get any of that.
None of the Quidditch. Not even I don't even know why we called these corresponding film scenes.
They're not even parallel. They're
parallel.
They're parallel-ish, as in they're running on separate tracks and they will never cross.
Yes. But what we did get in the movie does tie into several other sections of the book.
Yes, it does. But
like the dinner party encompassed conversations, which we talked about this at the beginning, but it encompassed conversations that Slughorn had with them back on the train.
Mm-hmm. It covers that Ginny and Dean have been fighting a lot, and that's covered a little bit later on. when Harry bumps into Ginny when they're going through the portrait hole, and Jenny's like, "Stop touching me!"
Yeah, we'll start to see more of that, but it does tie it into that. It just hasn't happened yet in the book.
Mm-hmm. Also, if he's making you cry like that, baby, Audi 5000.
Well,
I know you're 15, 16, but still.
she wasn't like that in the book, though.
She wasn't, but don't make her that way in the movie.
But they did.
But they did.
They really did. And I'm still salty about it. It's just kind of weird the way, obviously we've talked about this so many times now, because one of the biggest difference, like, yeah, we do have Harry at this party. We know that it ties in the fact because Hermione was at the party, but now Harry is there too. Mm-hmm. And the biggest change was Harry staying after, because that doesn't happen in the book at all in that way.
No, because he doesn't want to be there.
No. Even at this point of the book, he still doesn't want to be there. And it's just like, oh, God, I'm going to have to go.
Yeah.
And that is the first one that he ends up attending, isn't it? The Christmas party.
Oh, Christmas do, yeah.
Yeah. But when he stays after and has that conversation with Slughorn, even though it isn't remotely how it happened in the book, I liked it.
It added information that if you're only watching the movies, you needed. Information about how Slughorn was at the school, because you don't really get that until this point that Slughorn was at the school at the same time as Tom Riddle. So
you were his teacher. It's interesting, too, the way that Slughorn reacts to Harry's questioning. I feel like it's set up that he was dodging something.
He doesn't see people as
people,
good or bad. He sees people as successful or unsuccessful.
As opportunities?
Yes.
As collectibles?
Mrs. Weasley said that Slughorn didn't seem to have much time for Arthur. Mm-hmm. And for me, judging Arthur by his life, he is the most successful person in the wizarding world. He has a happy family. He does what he loves. He fucking loves messing with muggle shit.
Yeah.
And that's what he gets to do for his job.
And let's also look at genuinely how successful all of his kids have been thus far.
Yeah. I mean, Bill works for Gringotts. Charlie is off doing what he loves, working with dragons, probably getting paid fairly well for that. The boys are getting to do their favorite thing, be in a joke shop and be successful at that joke shop. And they're good people. That is the most important thing. If you're raising kids, is to make good people.
Not me over here laughing at the fact that you skipped Percy.
I realized that after I said the boys. I was trying to go in birth order, and I always forget that Percy falls before the boys. But Percy, at this moment, he's not what they want him to be. But he comes around. He is a true Weasley. He's a true Gryffindor. I don't care what anybody says. He is. He comes back, and he says, I know that I made a mistake.
I mean, admittedly, it was given to him because of his family and the fact that the minister wanted to spy on them. But he does get a really good position at the ministry.
But I think that all of that ends up helping Percy figure out what he actually wanted.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And when you're raising kids, at least in my opinion, the goal is to raise a happy, healthy, successful adult. And all of them, maybe except Ron, are happy, healthy. And Ron eventually gets to the happy, healthy, successful adult. But right now he's, 16. It's hard to deal with emotions.
That feeling of being the last before the daughter that he knew his
They
mother
always
always wanted.
Yeah. But it's also the way Slughorn reacts is, I think genuinely he thinks Voldemort is he's successful, and he is measuring by success versus not successful. Yeah. It's not good versus bad. He doesn't see that. It's not the same.
I think he struggles to see it because of it's almost like he likes the notoriety as opposed to.
Yeah. Like, I had contact with Voldemort before he turned bad.
But nobody else is going to appreciate that, so it makes him have that internal struggle of how do I talk about this? Because obviously, in the end, he does land on the correct side.
It takes a long time.
But it does take a long time.
And from the start of the first Wizarding War all the way to now, like, calm down, Horace. You should have figured out your side a long time ago.
You'd think, but like you said, he doesn't really see it that way.
No, he doesn't.
And I don't think it's until it's shoved in his face that he has to. But I think that's what makes his reaction in the movie so interesting and why I didn't mind this edition. Because you could see him just completely freeze at Harry's questions and just be like, I don't know how to answer this. And then all the way to the point where I don't know if we would say that it was a lie. Maybe he genuinely didn't see the monster there or saw it and didn't want to admit he saw it, because
I think it's that.
he does cover up his own memory of how he fed that monster, which we'll find out later.
Yeah, it's very similar to like how people sometimes will talk about Ted Bundy. Like, oh, I knew him. He seemed perfectly nice, blah, blah, blah. But there was always something a little odd about him. Or Jeffrey Dahmer, the way people talk. Like, people in high school knew Jeffrey Dahmer when he was like 18. And they'll be
Which was like a half hour from here.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. But they talk about how they knew him when he was like 18. And like, yeah, he was around, blah, blah, blah. He was a little weird. And that's the drop they give you. Is
Yeah.
He's a little weird.
I just think
And
it's
maybe
interesting
that's-
for Slughorn to say that if there was a monster, it was buried deep down. After...
I don't think it was.
Now, Dumbledore is extraordinarily observant and picks
And
up on
Slughorn
things.
is not, I would say.
I think Slughorn sees what he wants to see.
He does.
And I'm sure that is part of it.
He sees a quiet, brilliant boy who was on his way to being a first-rate wizard.
So we could make the argument that Dumbledore is genuinely the only person who was
Aware.
concerned by the way Tom Riddle was acting at 11 and up.
But a lot of them also didn't have that intimate moment with him.
Yeah.
And they see him in class and that's it.
Yeah, because he definitely let his guard down in that moment. I think Dumbledore mentions that later too. But the only thing about this scene that really bothers me is the way Harry delivers his apology when
sorry,
he's just
sir.
like, what was he like? And Slughorn's like, and he just goes, forgive me, sir, he killed my parents. I was like, what?
Dan reads it weird. It's odd.
We were talking earlier about how it came across very insincere, but he wasn't being sincere here. He was just trying to get information.
Yeah, he's putting on a face.
He did not roll well on his charisma check.
It's like a 3.
If that. But yeah, it doesn't line up with this section, but it's at least parallel and flows right into something that lines up much better with the second half. So yay that. We cut them both off at this point.
Now, speaking of Ron's reaction to Ginny and all of that, our Potter Pondering is going to tie into that. And how would you handle the situation if you had feelings for Ginny and you were in Harry's shoes?
So I dated my husband back in college, briefly. And then we broke up. Sort of got back together, but never officially went our separate ways again. And the next year of college, he actually started dating somebody else. But we were all still in the same friend group.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of blew it with her one night because he invited her to a party at his place and was so drunk he didn't even remember that she was there, and made a comment to her the next day about how he wished that she had made it. And she's just kind of like, what the fuck do you mean I was there? And I actually talked her into giving him a second chance. Because I was playing the long game.
I'm here for the long game.
I just wanted him to be happy.
You know.
And
It's the goal.
Yeah, I didn't want to be that crazy ex-girlfriend that couldn't be friends with him. So even though that was hard for me, I was trying to be a genuine friend. So I think that's how I would handle it. I would try and be supportive. Just hope that she'd be happy.
If it were me, I would straight up just tell Ron. Not in these words, but like, your sister's hot and I really want to date her or whatever.
Your sister has nice skin and
She
I
has
really want
nice
to date
skin.
her.
Yeah. I feel like Harry, because their relationship is what it is, I feel like if Harry had approached it like that,
Yeah.
it probably
Well,
would be fine.
I think it's funny too because when Ron found out that Ginny broke up with Michael Corner, he said, choose better next time, and looks at Harry. Because he knows.
Yeah.
He knows already. So I think he would be okay with it, and Harry just maybe didn't fully pick up on that.
Yeah, Harry
or
just
just
has
too
this
nervous,
idea.
or
I don't know.
I don't know. But we would be very interested in knowing your thoughts. So find the posts on our Facebook page and share them, or call us at 216-526-6792 and leave your response as a voicemail. Make sure you start off telling us your name and then go into your answer. Don't forget, you can also stitch your response on TikTok. For now, at least.
We really look forward to reading, hearing, and seeing them.
This week's wizarding word is that Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is opening in Chicago September 10th. We should try and go.
September 10th. That's too late. We need to go on September 1st.
Yeah, I feel like they should have planned that better.
Yeah, no.
So we've got an article about it. We'll share it on Facebook. It just says, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, it's time to believe in magic. So it's going to be coming to Chicago on its first ever North American tour. This is kicking it off. We don't yet know where it's going after that. I still have my fingers crossed that it's
Hopefully
going to
it'll
come to
here.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
I understand why it would go to Chicago, because Chicago is a bigger and better known city. But hello, y'all. Cleveland has the second biggest theater district after actual Broadway in New York. So we really should be on this list. But in general, look it up. If you live in the Chicago area or near the Chicago area, or really just want to travel to Chicago, you can make that trip between September 10th and I think it's like February 1st of 2025 and go see Cursed Child while you're there. I know that some people don't agree that Cursed Child is canon, but I've also heard that seeing it is completely different than reading it, and it's just pretty awesome. So I definitely want to see it.
They are able to bring the magic alive on stage in so many ways. And I think seeing magic in front of your eyes.
Well, theater magic is
also
already
theater magic, yes.
freaking amazing. So if you're using theater magic to create magic, I feel like it would be amazing.
Just like when you see Elphaba fly for the first time and you want to puke because it's so exciting. Or at least that was my reaction. Sorry if you didn't want to puke as well.
I've seen Wicked 3 times now, I think. So
I've seen it once, and
so
the
good.
one and only time that I saw it and she took off, I was like bawling my eyes out. So
when I saw
true theater kid right here.
Lion King on Broadway
Yeah.
as my high school graduation present from my godfather, who lives in New York. We weren't in the very front row, but we were down very on the front, but he got us aisle seats on purpose.
Ooh, yeah,
because the animals walk. I was there with my friend that I've known my entire life. She doesn't even like theater, but
it blows you away.
Yeah, she and I were both crying, but she was crying. That's how magical it was. And she doesn't even like theater. So it was really a cool experience. And I love getting the opportunity to see things that I love come to life with that level of magic.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love Harry Potter.
Literal magic into the
So
theater
I feel like
magic.
whether you liked the screenplay book of Cursed Child, the story or whatever, I feel like whether you liked it or not, there's still going to be reasons to enjoy this production. And I really want to see it.
I would be interested. I would be happy to go to Chi-Town and see this.
Yeah,
I would
let's
like
try
to
and
go
make
to
that
Chicago.
happen. If anybody else, we'll let you guys know the dates we're going, and we can do like a
meetup.
Fawkes Sake Pod meetup.
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
But that will lead us to this week's trivia question. So this week, how many points is Gryffindor up when Harper spots the snitch? The first one who responds with the correct answer and the code word #CouldStillLose will get a sticker.
Another way to get a sticker is to rate and review us through iTunes. If you don't have an Apple account, then you can write us a recommendation on our Facebook page. Make sure to email us at foxsakepod@gmail.com to let us know you did, and we'll get back to you to figure out which sticker you want and where to send it.
Don't forget to find us and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at FoxSakePod. Following us on Podbean at FoxSakePod will get you the episode as early as possible and give you a leg up in answering the trivia question. You can also go to our website at forfoxsakepodcast.com to check out our For Fox's Sake and Harry Potter related merchandise for sale.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we post our weekly podcast episodes, cooking show episodes, vlogs, bloopers, and other random videos.
If you would like to become a patron, you can find us on Patreon at FoxSakePod. Patronage starts at $2 and will get you some awesome perks like for Fawkes' sake swag, access to our Discord channel, chats, and more. Check out our page for details.
Any support you can give is greatly appreciated.
And join us next week when we talk about the second half of Chapter 14, Felix Felicis, and the corresponding film scenes.
Thanks for listening. Hope you hear us again. I'm Karlee.
I'm Ellen, and we are
For Fawkes' sake.